Thank you for making it through Dhaka traffic and starting on time. There are more people coming. But give a round of applause for yourself for being Dhaka. That's surely a big achievement. And it shows the dedication you have actually to listen to the speaker today. But let me just give a little bit of background of why we are actually getting this talk. It's not just a talk for us. We are to believe that, we said that we are an institution for innovation and learning. What does it translate to? So for us, innovation doesn't actually mean to be just entrepreneurs. It's a mindset. It's a space for everyone to grow and thrive. And that mindset starts with a certain level of understanding of critical thinking, creativity, empathy. So we started a series of knowledge transfer, of how we have to disseminate knowledge. Because we want to transform people, our vision is to transform people, think, learn, innovate in the society. So based on that, the Uchaya was built for this, the space was for this reason. We want to have conversations that are just beyond the mundane one. Traditionally in Bangladesh, we don't get to curate our conversations. We generally go to conferences where marketers talk about marketing to marketers. You might just YouTube it. So we will see how different skills, different conversations can trigger the mindset of future for everyone. And how collaboration happens, you don't collaborate with someone just because you have great ideas. You have collaborated with someone with a common interest. You share certain values, you trust each other. And based on that is, we started these conversations on how these translations. If you look at that, we have 5 things for innovators' mindset. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, cognitive flexibility, and empathy. So today, what we're going to talk about is constructive conflict. Lutfey Siddiqi is going to take that ahead. But it actually anchors to our collaboration pillar. And if we understand this better over time, our future skills, our future learning and innovation is going to strengthen further. And we are going to take it across to your work, and each one will become an innovator the way we think, learn, innovate every day. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saif, and thank you everyone for being here and for giving me your time. Is the sound okay? I don't have to eat the mic like I usually have to. Okay. So I want to start off by saying what a wonderful venue this is, and how wonderful I think the concept is behind what Saif is trying to achieve. I've had the privilege of listening to him and his ideas as they were taking shape, and now to see it in this form is really wonderful. I think he's really one of those unique people with the ideas, the energy, and the sheer likability as a person. That's very hard to find, all 3 in one. So I'm really grateful, Saif, for you bringing me here. I do appreciate that I'm the guinea pig. You are experimenting with me. So this is the first one, and so take this as experimental. If it goes well, then he'll bring in proper speakers after me. And I think we're here to talk about conflict, bias, and diversity. Let's start with, since the spirit of this is not a lecture, but for it to be a bit more interactive, let me ask you a couple of questions. What do you think of when you think of the absence of conflict?
Stasis. Stasis.
Stasis? Okay, that's one. Any other? Absence of conflict is?
Inertia. Too good to be true.
Too good to be true? Okay.
Is it about peace?
Peace? I was expecting peace, okay, so we got that.
Dumb ideas.
Agreement on dumb ideas, I like that one.
Boredom.
Boredom, boring.
Being complacent.
Being complacent. Okay, these are all the right answers. I'm very encouraged by it. The one that came up a lot a couple of years ago when we had a discussion on this topic in Dhaka with, I guess, a different generation of people was harmony. Absence of conflict is harmony. And that was seen as the objective. But if we get this right, if we get constructive conflict right, then we have harmony. I am of the opinion that that is not necessarily the right objective. and you've already given us some of the reasons for that. Would you say that we have, if you think about your own lives today, this week, is there too much conflict or too little conflict around you? Too much? Is that the same for everyone? Too much?
Inefficient.
Exactly. Too much of the wrong kind of conflict and too little of the right kind of conflict. In the same way that I think the absence of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy, and therefore potentially the build-up of a pressure cooker that might explode in an uncontrolled way at a later stage. I think we need to have more conflict of the right kind. We shouldn't shove it under the carpet and pretend it's not there, and have more conflict of the constructive kind. But of course there are reasons why we don't have more of those conflict, because there are some rules that we need to follow, and when those rules are not followed, it degenerates into something destructive. So that's what I think constructive conflict is. And my journey into this world came about from a very corporate, institutional place. I was an investment banker for many years, and as a result of the global financial crisis, me and a few others, we had to look at what is it about organizations that make for good governance and what makes for bad governance. I went on to do my higher secondary of International Baccalaureate in Wales, a place called UWC Atlantic College. I was there for a couple of years, and then university in England. I started work in London, worked in Zurich, 11 years in Singapore, married to a Singaporean Chinese Christian, and we have 2 boys, and we now live in London. So if you're talking about diversity, if you're talking about being messed up from an identity point of view, there's probably very few you'll find around the world as myself. So it's important for me that we don't let this identity thing become too insular. It's important for me and for my children that the world is more inclusive than what I find it to be. It's also important for me because in every setting that I've been in, the whole flashback that I just gave you, in every single setting, I was a member of a minority group in the way you traditionally define it. I've never been a member of the majority in any of those settings. But it hasn't had any, to my knowledge, it hasn't had any negative impact on me. So I'm very keen that it doesn't happen to others. So that's the personal motivation that I come from. As I said, it was the corporate setting that made me think about constructive conflict and diversity. Did you know that Korean Airlines used to have one of the highest rates of plane crashes in the 80s? And today it's one of the safest airlines. Any idea what caused that transformation?
Power distance. Power distance.
Power distance, that's right. What's the power distance, sir?
Power distance, I'm comfortable speaking in Bangla.
Yeah.
So power distance হচ্ছে মানে গুরুজনের সাথে ছোটদের যে ডিসটেন্সটা থাকে যেটা মানে ডিসেন্সি মেইনটেইন করার জন্য ইউজ করে আর কি মানুষ ওটা ওই জিনিসটা আর কি
That's exactly it. So, and it's ironic, you're sitting down on the floor, I'm standing right here. But this was basically the cockpit before they made the changes. The captain is the supreme leader, and the first officer doesn't have much authority. So if you don't have authority to challenge the captain, you don't have the 360-degree views. So you could be going into a mountain and the first officer can see it, but if he or she is not empowered to challenge you, then the system is unsafe. And so that is a fact. It turns out that it was a mechanical failure. It was a software of interaction in the cockpit that made the system either safe or unsafe. And this was exactly the same in banks, in mining companies, in petroleum companies, in corporates, in organizations up and down the system. So how we interact with each other, what permission we give to people, in how we challenge each other, has a direct bearing on the risk resilience of an organization. So when we looked at why is it that people are not empowered to ask more questions, to challenge, there is of course a variety of reasons. Some of them are very obvious, some are cultural, notions of respect, notions of face. In the Far East, it's very important that you give face to your elders. And some of it is just that it wasn't made explicit. So what happened in the case of Korean Air is that they explicitly changed the rules of engagement. So you have to be on first names basis. There's no sir, there's no mister, there's first names basis. You have to be clear with the words that you're using. And in most cases, the technical words, if they're English, you've got to use those English words so that there's no ambiguity in those situations. So those are the ways in which the organization was changed. The other reason why you don't have multiplicity of views looking at a risk situation is the lack of diversity around the table. And I don't mean just the traditional definition of diversity, which is about gender or race, but it's truly cognitive diversity. Diversity of perspective, diversity of background, so that when you're really looking at a situation and you're about to take a decision, as a management team, as a board, as a governance team, you have as many perspectives coming into it as possible. And when that's missing, you don't really get the benefit of diversity. You can have as many women as you want around the table, as many members of the minority groups as you want, so you're visually diverse, but you could be totally undiverse in practical sense if you don't have mechanisms to pull out the diverse perspectives of every member around the table. So here diversity is by design. It's part of how you design the boardroom, how you design your policies and your processes. As somebody else has once said, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice, and that choice needs to be proactively done. If you don't proactively seek out diversity, then you don't really get the benefit of those multiple perspectives. So that's in a business sense, and if you want to go deeper into this line of thought, there's a lot of literature out there, some of the books that are in the popular domain, some might actually even be over there. There's Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. I know you've read it, you've read them all. Anyone else?
Nassim Taleb.
There's Nassim Taleb, Black Swans, that's another one. What else?
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis, yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Outliers by Malcolm.
Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yuval Harari.
Yuval Harari, yeah, I saw that over there too. There's Nudge. There is Blind Spots, so you can go on and on. And if you don't like reading, there's also lots of TED Talks, of course. There's one that I particularly like. It's by Iris Bonet. Iris is at Harvard. She's at Harvard, but she's also on the board of Credit Suisse. So she knows how it works in organizations as well. And she's done some excellent work in how you design to de-bias situations that are inherently filled with bias to begin with. So for example, the example she gives is orchestra, auditioning for orchestra. It turned out that there were too many men being picked for the orchestra, and so it's only after they introduced blind auditions, they put a curtain in front, that it led to much more of a gender neutral outcome. Even though these people, if you ask them, do you think you are biased, they would have told you, no, I'm not biased. But obviously they were. So she comes up with methods of introducing blindness into the process so that you fight against your bias. But basically the biases are there, they just need to be fought. So that was 2012-13, thereabouts, when I was looking at it from a corporate setting. Then you cut to 2015, and by that time it became obvious to me, and it was obvious to others a lot before me, that it's the same issue, our inability to engage in constructive conflict and seeking out diversity, that causes some other issues, wider issues. It's the same tools and techniques that are used for religious radicalization, and it's the same tools and techniques that are used for political radicalization, for ultranationalism, for far right, far left politics, which we're seeing a lot of in the UK with Brexit or with the Trump election in the US. So in the secular world and in the religious world, it's some of the same things. And you know what they are, right? It starts with something harmless. It's a joke, or it's a throwaway comment that you sort of laugh at, but you realize it's the start of a slippery slope. And unless you stop yourself at the top of the slippery slope, it's very easy to slide down and not be able to stop yourself. It also starts with false binaries. Everything is presented as one or the other. Capitalism or social justice can't be both. What else? What are the binaries? Religion or feminism can't be both. Or here yesterday I overheard a debate on whether it's Apollo or United, which is the better hospital over here. Or, you know, the traditional Abahani Muhammadan and what are the others?
Kalo Sundar, false binary.
Kalo Sundar. That's true. So am I. Okay. So that's a good one. So these false binaries, unless we catch ourselves that, hang on, that framing where something is presented as one or the other can actually be one and the other. So that's the other one. And the last one, of course, is that most of the time, the silent majority, they can't be bothered because it's just too much of a hassle, it's not impacting me. Now, until the norm changes, and suddenly it's too difficult or impossible to change the norm. So it's the same process that takes place throughout. So we wanted to see if it's possible, and the way we phrased it is it possible to immunize ourselves? Think of an inoculation injection. Is it possible to immunize ourselves and communities so that we cannot be exploited with polarization as easily as we are right now? Is it possible to make us resistant so that next time somebody comes to us and with the language of us and them, and you're better and they're inferior and this identity group versus that identity group, we're able to say, no, you know, we're cool, we're fine. We have differences, but we know how to deal with it. Is it possible to immunize ourselves in that manner? And then in the work setting, going back to where we started, is it possible for us to collaborate where if we have a difference of opinion, it doesn't degenerate very quickly into a personal conflict, where I hate you and you hate me just because we disagree on something. Or, if you disagree with me on this topic, I have to disagree with you on the next topic, just to retaliate. Right? So is it possible to inoculate ourselves on that? And we weren't able to come up with grand universal solutions. What we were able to do is come up with an inventory of specific interventions that have been done all over the world. And I would be very keen to discuss and see what you think may be specific interventions that work over here. There are two sets of YouTube videos that I would encourage you to watch. One is from Davos 2015, which was a workshop on exactly this topic. And we had examples from Tunisia, Turkey, Middle America, Norway, Scotland, Japan. Everyone gave us their specific examples where interventions, very clever, creative interventions have worked. And the other is an event at the London School of Economics, LSE, that we did at the end of 2016. And the event was called Beyond Tolerance. And Beyond Tolerance was exploring this issue from the perspective of what's the role of education? What's the role of business? What's the role of media? What's the role of the arts and entertainment? And again, from all over the world, we had some really cool examples. There's a gentleman, his name is Naif Al-Mutawa, he's an Arab American, And he came up with these superheroes. They're Muslim superheroes, and extremely popular in the Middle East. And I think together with DC Comics, they agreed that the plot line would have them, initially they were fighting against Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is all covered up in that version. And then they were fighting each other, and they realized that they were being instigated by extremists in their own sides, and so then they get together and then they beat people up. I haven't watched that particular one, but he has a tremendous following, and when you hear him tell the story of why he came up with it and how he came up with it, it's fascinating. We had somebody talk us through, and she did some interactive theater with us, where she played out the power dynamics, how the different position of power that we can come from has an impact on whether we express prejudice and racism or not. And all the way through to, we had the World Jewish Relief talk about their work that they're doing with Syrian refugees. A lot of people are not aware of that, etc., etc. Those two playlists on YouTube, I'd encourage you to see if you want to. Let me just finish off with what I think are 3, 4, 5 bullet points that we can take away from all of these, bearing in mind that they cannot really be generalized. So at the expense of that, I'm still going to try and generalize what the points are. So first of all, it is possible to operate on ourselves and catch ourselves when we're about to display prejudice, or when we are about to display the wrong kind of conflict, and bring us back into the right sphere. And there are techniques and hacks and methods in which it can be done. Part of it is just repeating a few things. Part of it is the vocabulary, the words we use that condition our thought process. So there's a list of things that can be done, but unfortunately, they don't seem to stick. So the immunization, the needle, you need to put in every 6 months or so, because the impact wears off, it seems. The second thing is we can operate at the level of children in schools, and there it's much more effective. There's some work done, I think, with Turkish and Kurdish children in Turkey, where they are given diversity training at a very young age, and that is obviously a lot more sticky. It's like, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with skiing, but it's almost impossible to learn how to ski as an adult, because you have to throw yourself in the direction of the slope, whereas with children it's much easier because they're learning it as they're learning to walk. So there's hope for kids, there's less hope for you and me. Then there is organizations and companies, and it's a lot easier to design organizational processes than it is for us as individuals to slow down and catch ourselves. I think individually we will have our lapses, but if we have institutions and organizations that are designed for diversity, that is designed for de-bias in a deliberate manner, then that's a lot more effective way. And that is why when people talk about good governance and good institutions, these are not just World Bank macroeconomic terms, they filter down all the way through to us at this level of interaction. And then the other thing is, the more exposure we have, the less hostile we become. It is a fact that in the West, communities that are most Islamophobic or most anti-Semitic are the people who have never seen or met a Muslim or a Jew. So the more interaction you have, then the more direct it becomes. And I can say this for myself. Before I went to Atlantic College, I think I was, in various degrees, I was everything. I was racist, anti-Semitic, misogynist for sure. What else? Homophobic, absolutely. So all of those, I hope, I have been able to, by acknowledging them, being able to moderate, but it's very clear that the more interaction I've had, the easier and better it has been over time.